Hey, this is Matthew. Well, I am putting out this video on Sunday, but I'm actually going to be at a Rite of Passage camp that I am running. And what is a Rite of Passage camp? Well, the ones I do are for teenage boys and they do it with their dads. So it's a father-son Rite of Passage program. And I did one when I was 15, and so I've been kind of involved with them ever since. And now I'm running them. And in this video, I want to talk about a bit about rites of passage in regards to the way that we do them on the camps and how we can bring this into our own lives for thinking about transitions and moving from one phase to another phase. So rites of passage are something that have been around for millennia. It's something that's very common in civilizations in all of time, and it's this kind of thing that Joseph Campbell has talked a lot about in The Power of Myth and other books reflecting on how important stories and journeys are in our lives. And the challenge is that in modern society in the Western world, and I'm in Australia, there's been a big decline in these kind of access to programs that create rites of passage at significant moments in life. So the moment we're talking about is the moment when you move from being a boy or like a child to a young person or an adult. And this is quite a significant moment in life, and for me it certainly made a big difference. When I first did my camp, after I left, I gave up. I was addicted to World of Warcraft at the time. I gave up my World of Warcraft addiction. I skipped up a grade in high school, and I really decided that I was going to get life experience and be someone that I wanted to look up to, like I was looking up to some of the leaders on the camp. And so it really helped me. And I remember writing in my journal at the time that this was the best experience of my life, and it was just amazing. And now, years on, I know and I understand what happened and why it's so impactful. And so the basic structure of a rite of passage is that there's three major phases. There's the separation. So to have a significant rite of passage, normally you have to be separated from your everyday life in some way. And then the second phase is the challenge or the ordeal stage. And that's where the sort of shift happens. And then there's the return or the reintegration stage, which happens after that. So you have separation, ordeal or challenge, and then return. And in the ordeal phase, which is basically what we deal with on the camp, there's three major phases. The first phase is the stories. So stories are the first phase. Challenge and having challenges and honoring is the third phase. And those three phases are the core of any rite of passage: story, challenge, honor. And stories are about acknowledging and sharing the stories of what it's like to be a human. What is it like to be me right now living my life? What was it like for me growing up? What was life like? What is life like for me? These are things that we talk about a lot. We say, how are you? But we never really often talk deeply about what is the experience like of being a human. And so we explore a bunch of different topics. And then with challenges, there's lots of different challenges that are traditional in rites of passage. And we have a number of challenges on our programs which we don't talk about publicly. And the reason we don't is because, one, it would spoil it for people coming through, and two, that it's really customized for who is actually there. So the one person might get one challenge and someone might get another one, and they're very varied. And the point of a challenge is that it's not supposed to be risky. It's supposed to be a challenge. And a challenge means something that you don't know whether you can overcome. You don't know whether you have it in you to actually step up and rise to the challenge. You don't know if that's in you. But what you do know is that you're going to give it a go. And what we want is challenges that are really challenging, but people can succeed. So we want a 100% success rate and it to be really challenging. So you can see that there's a, that to achieve that, is not straightforward, and that's why we don't talk about it too much, because there's a real art to doing that, and we want to leave it, make sure it's a surprise, and make sure it is actually challenging for people who come. And so the challenge. After the challenge, there's a lot of sense of self-accomplishment. Wow, I've achieved something for myself. This is for me. And it's really important that there's a self-acknowledgement is central to rites of passage challenges. You can't be doing it for someone else. You can't be doing it for to make someone proud of you or to get some trophy or something. It has to be really inside of you that you're doing for yourself because you value what you have to offer the world. And after you've done the challenge, then there's the final phase, which is honoring. And the question is, how do we honor you for being you? And different rites of passages have different types of honoring that's kind of required. And the type that's required in young people rite of passage, or the ones we do, is around acknowledgements of the great person that you are in the community. So you're this person and you're part of a community for this rite of passage. And what is it that we see in you that we can really acknowledge and you can be really proud of? And the reason we do this as a community-based honouring process is that for young people, they often still don't quite have a real sense of who they are. If you ask an adult who's like 30, for example, or 40, or 25 maybe even, they'll often be able to articulate who they are, and they kind of have quite a somewhat stabilized sense of themselves. And with adults, you actually want them to honor themselves. You don't want to necessarily provide it. Whereas teenagers, they're still forming themselves, so providing it is of huge value to them. And what you're doing in that process is you're providing a really positive reinforcement for the value of just them being themselves. There's a huge value in my life, and certainly I think it's pretty much universal, that being acknowledged and accepted for who you are is of huge value. And in the kind of counseling or psychotherapy model, we might say it is unconditional positive regard, which is basically you can't do anything that's going to help us, that's going to make us judge you or make us resent you or whatever. It's really like anything you do is perfectly fine. And that's what we're doing in this phase of the process. And then probably the most challenging part of the rite of passage appears, which is the return. Because it's one thing to be someone in one context, and it's another thing to bring that person or that new thing into another context. I've talked about many times before that when you create something new, like in this case, a role, you have a new role of being a young man, for example. And of course, there's programs for young women's, but I'm just talking about young men for this conversation. So you've got this new role of yourself, and it's this little tiny plant of you being a young man, of you being independent and your ability to speak up and be yourself. And this is really small, and it's really easy to crush that, to just like destroy it and crush it. And so managing the reintegration is really important. And so one of the things we do is we try and involve as many people as possible in that, so family, friends, that type of thing. And we try and make it as public as possible, because the more people who can acknowledge you and see you and validate you in your new role, or at least see you in that new way, the more that they're able to let go of their previous judgments about you and their previous preconceptions about what it is for you to be you. And those are the kind of the broad framework of what we consider, or what my understanding and my experience is of a rite of passage. And if you ever have a chance to be involved with a rite of passage, I would really recommend it. There's lots available. I've actually got a link on my website I'll put below, which links to a few different places that do rites of passage around the world. There's lots of different ones, and I would really recommend that you expose yourself to one at least once. If you'd like to hear more from me, I write an email newsletter and I send out every Sunday, and that'll be out today with this video. And until next time, the journey continues.